that, it is my pleasure to introduce Burien Fire Chief Mike Mars. I mentioned how I almost set my house on fire twice. Once was a barbecue and once was a dryer. And I will also thank Mr. Will Henriquez, who is also on this call, because he taught both of my kids how important it is when you see fire or smell smoke to call 911. Because I was telling my kids, mommy's got this, it's fine, everybody calm down. And my kids are like, calling 911. And it was great. We really appreciate our fire department and looking forward to learning a little bit more about fire safety. So Chief Mike Mars, over to you.
All right, thank you very much for having me here tonight. Excuse me, I'm Mike Mars, Fire Chief for King County Fire District 2. And that King County Fire District 2 serves North Highline, unincorporated North Highline, City of Burien, and City of Normandy Park. So we've got a fairly large response area. We do that out of 4 stations, and we have about 75 firefighters. And much like Ted's math, that gets a little squishy sometimes. We don't have 75 people every day. They're spread out over 3 shifts that work 24-hour shifts. So we have A, B, C shifts. They rotate through on a schedule. On any given day, we have minimum staffing of 15, and that gets us 4 engine companies, an aid car, and a battalion chief. And then Monday through Friday are what we call the day staff. We have training officers, we have assistant chiefs, we have fire marshals, we have fire code inspectors, investigators, and those kind of things. And then we, because of COVID, our numbers kind of dropped, but we also usually have about 15 volunteer firefighters. And that's where I started my career 30 years ago, was being a volunteer here in Burien with King County District 2. So yeah, a little bit about my background. So I've been with the fire department here for 30 years, married, have 2 kids like Ted. Mine are much older because I also have 2 grandkids and another grandkid on the way. So I'm going to have 3 granddaughters by November. So very proud of them. A couple things I want to talk tonight, certainly 4th of July, and also the extreme heat. And maybe then we'll touch COVID a little bit also. Try to stay, I don't have a fancy slide deck like Ted did, but Scott Schaefer, I was talking to him right before the meeting, and he said he appreciated my quote, and I said I was going to use it again tonight. It is the driest 4th of July in my 30 years with the fire department. And I've worked almost every 4th of July for the last 30 years here, starting out as a volunteer, because 4th of July for us is an all hands on deck. All of the volunteers, we staff up. We try to get about double the staffing because we know it's going to be more than double the busy day as a typical day. Although yesterday with the heat, we doubled our normal calls. Our average is about 30 calls for service per day out of the 4 stations. And yesterday we did 60 calls. Many of them were heat related. And we'll talk about some of the challenges with the heat. And as Ted talked about, some of the challenges with the heat related, and we were definitely building the airplane as we were flying down the runway, trying to take off. So we had some real challenges since about Friday of last week. But someone had asked me, how do you, actually one of my bosses, one of my elected fire commissioners, like, my grass doesn't seem as brown as it normally is like in August. How do we know that it's so dry out, or what do we base that it's so dry and there's really a severe extreme danger right now? And so there's actually scientists throughout the state that monitor what's called the fuel moisture level for the 100-hour fuel. So I'm going to geek out a little bit here on fire department stuff, but what that is, it's 1 to 3 inch dry dead fuels. And so they actually measure the moisture content, and anything below 20% moisture content of that size fuel, the 100-hour fuel. They also do it for 1,000-hour fuels. They also do it for grasses. They also do it for others, but they kind of target the 100-hour fuel. And anything below 20% on this side of the mountains is considered high risk for fire. Right now, we're at 8% fuel moisture. we typically don't get below 20% until late August. We start getting nervous around mid-August, late July, early August time frame, because we start getting down to that threshold of 20%. Well, we're already at 8%. And so we are so significantly lower than where we normally are for the 4th of July, or even at the height of the fire season for us, that the risk of a large, what they call a conflagration fire, is extreme. And we're really going into this time frame where it's going to be extreme fire danger, even on this side of the mountains. And then you add any kind of wind, you add any kind of lightning, and then you add thousands or maybe even tens of thousands of sources of ignition with people lighting fireworks off during the 4th of July. And that can be anything as innocent as a sparkler, as, you know, a little Roman candle, or I'm trying to think of some of the ones that we kind of think of as safe and sane, and some of the ones that this year are still legal in the unincorporated area. Even those will start these fires. And the problem is the fuel moisture is so low that what happens, the fire spreads so rapidly that we can never get ahead of it. And so on most 4th of Julys, and you know, the joke for a long time around here was summer begins in Seattle on the 5th of July. And it really was true. You know, we kind of had, you know, maybe a little bit of nice weather. 4th of July is kind of iffy. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it's kind of nice. But then on the 5th, it really starts getting nice for the rest of summer. Well, we started earlier this year. And so we haven't had, you know, any rain, significant rain for weeks. And so what happens is, where we would normally be able to get those fires out when they're very small, what we call the incipient stages, you know, maybe they're a little, you know, 5x5 grass fire, a 10x10 grass fire. These, by the time someone notices them, calls 911, we're able to get there. They go from, you see it at 10x10, we get there, it's 100x100. By the time we get enough resources there, it's 1,000x1,000. We've got multiple houses involved. And so we're always playing catch up. And that's where we get these conflagrations that we've seen in other communities, where entire, you know, communities can get wiped out. I don't want to be doom and gloom and talk, you know, like, you know, the end is near, but there is a real risk that we're going into where we could lose multiple houses. 2 years ago, we lost 2 houses to a fireworks related in the unincorporated and had a fatality. And, you know, the risk is real, and it's extremely heightened this year. So as Ted said, fireworks are illegal in the city of Burien. They're not in the city of Norney Park. They're not in the unincorporated. So we have that challenge of different jurisdictions, but they're just as dangerous in any community, especially this year. And we're working, you know, with any group that we can to get that message out that we know we're coming out of COVID. We know in the unincorporated areas that this is the last year that they're legal. And we're just imploring people, please don't light fireworks off this year. We are going to have significant problems. I'm sorry, I got distracted by the question in the
don't worry. We'll have time to get to the question.
I'll circle back. I saw
yeah, circle back.
And so we're just really imploring people, please don't light fireworks this year. There really are thousands or tens of thousands of opportunities to ignite those fires. And we are already so busy. And as Ted pointed out, as much as we want to focus on the fireworks, trying to educate, trying to get people not to do them, those are also the days that we're dealing with our normal heart attacks. We're dealing with our strokes. We're dealing with other car accidents. Hopefully not, but I can remember a couple of years ago, we started out with a shooting at about 8 o'clock in the morning down First Avenue, a running gun battle with about 3 or 4 patients. So, you know, our day doesn't focus on just fire. We have our normal shenanigans that are going on in the community that we have to deal with. So I'll answer all your questions about that, anything fireworks related that you want me to. We do up staff. We try to double our staffing on that day. And we're just really asking everyone in the community, please help this year and not light those fireworks. As far as heat related, certainly in all of our minds, just what we got through with those record-breaking temperatures where we just crushed all of the heat records the last 3 or 4 days. Our heat-related illness calls have skyrocketed. There again, we doubled our call volume yesterday. Many of those were heat-related. And unfortunately, those are a lot of deaths. There are a lot of deaths in our community. There's a lot of deaths in what we listen to, which is South King County. All the fire districts in South King County are dispatched by the same Valleycom agency. So we hear all of those calls. We see them on our CAD computers. We're going to many CPRs. We're going to many people that have passed away because of heat related and are found by loved ones, typically elderly, underlying health issues and those kind of things. But it affects all of us. We had a fire Sunday night. When I was done at that fire scene on Sunday, I was just spent. I mean, I had a booming headache, thirsty, exhausted beyond what I should have been for the amount of work I do, which is not a lot at fires. And so clearly, you know, those early signs of heat exhaustion and dehydration. So, you know, drink lots of water, stay cool, try to stay out of the sun, don't go outside during the day. And certainly, I think these are the messages that we're going to have to continue to develop, and along with all of our other safety messages, start getting those out into the communities earlier, working with the city, the police, social services to have the cooling shelters available. We displaced about 4 residents of the apartment building because of the fire, and because of all the heat, because of all the people that were going to hotels to get air-conditioned rooms. We had a hard time working with Red Cross, or Red Cross was having difficulty finding available rooms for our displaced fire victims. And so we actually worked with King County and the homeless shelter the COVID homeless shelter that they were opening up on 112th. They offered us up 4 rooms for our displaced people. So we were actively looking, and that was a real challenge for us. The other ones, and I'm sorry, we got a house fire that's going on, so you may hear some tones in the background because I'm still at work. The other thing I want to talk about is just that overall heat and what to kind of look at. Certainly I talked about the dehydration. You got to drink, and just really hydrate. A lot of them were calls that we've been seeing are the core body temperature, where we're going, especially with the elderly or the homebound, where they're just not drinking enough and their overall dehydration goes down and their core body temperature is going up. And we've seen in the last couple of days some of the highest core body temperature patients that I've ever heard of. And so we have adults with core body temperatures in the 105, 106 range. Which is not sustainable and leads to death at that rate. So, and unfortunately, as the body temperature goes up, they tend to lose more fluids through evaporation. They're not drinking enough, and it's kind of a vicious cycle. So you really got to keep ahead of the hydration. Certainly fatigue. We've actually had a lot of calls where and I certainly felt that, like I said, on Sunday, you get fatigue, weakness, and we see a lot of falls. We're having a lot of elderly. They're weakened because of the extreme heat, the dehydration, elevated body temperature, and they're falling, and they're causing secondary injuries. So things to think about, certainly help people in our community. If you know loved ones, if you have people that live around you that have health needs or elderly, try to help them with those kind of things. Try to hydrate, get lots of rest, don't work outside, look at cooling centers, cool towels, cool baths or showers, anything to try to reduce that core body temperature. The other thing that we found is we're getting a lot of respiratory calls. And if anyone's been up early in the morning, you look outside, beautiful red sunrises or beautiful red sunsets, it's pretty stagnant air right now, and they're not from fires, and that usually comes later in the summer where we start having those air quality issues because of fires. But this is actually air quality has degraded just because of the inversion, and then just all the pollutants. They're just sticking around. They're not being the normal pushed away or rained out and cleaned. And so we're seeing a lot of respiratory distress. And there again, people with asthma, COPD, any kind of respiratory, you get that extra burden on your respiratory because of the pollutants. And then there again, all of those things kind of trigger those secondary respiratory calls for us. We also have, we haven't locally, but we've been participating through mutual aid. We've had a lot of cold water calls. Most of them have been in the Green River, but several other lakes. So far, we haven't had any. We do quite a bit of shoreline on the Sound. We have surface water rescue swimmers. We also have Lake Burien. We have Arrow Lake. We do a lot of mutual aid with SeaTac over at Angle Lake. So they get a lot of calls there. So there's very early in the season, the water is still very cold, and we've had a tremendous increase in the number of drownings and near drownings that we've helped with. Like I said, we haven't had any here. We've also got a couple lakes up in the unincorporated area that we go to. So hospital capacity, that's another one that we're struggling with. Every day we look online and we know it's called divert, and that's where a hospital is at capacity and they are no longer accepting patients from us. And so we have to divert, or their ambulance crew will have to divert. And so Valley Medical was on divert for ALS, which is the most acute ill people, and that's advanced life support. That's our paramedics. The basic life support, they said they're about 1 or 2 patients away from being on divert that. St. Anne's Highline here was, they're about 1 or 2 patients today being away from divert. And what that happens to us, instead of being able to take our either ALS or BLS patients to a local hospital, they're having to be sent downtown, or they're having to be sent to Federal Way or Auburn. And so that increases our out of service time as those transports, or as we're waiting for those transports. So talking to our counterparts at TriMed Ambulance or some of the other ambulance companies we use, they're saying up to a 4-hour delay for them to drop a patient off at an ER the last couple of days. So the hospitals are swamped. We're taking them a lot of patients. People are coming in off the streets, going to the ERs. And so they're very swamped right now. The other thing that causes, if our rig is out of service dealing with that patient, we're seeing a lot of this. We're getting either mutual aid, or we're doing what's called our second or third or fourth deep in the run card. So normally we have a general response area for each station, and they somewhat overlap, but we go from the closest fire station to the call. And what we're finding is, like if we're in downtown Burien, all of our rigs are out of service, we may have to pull our fire engine from Normandy Park Station, or we may have to pull from the unincorporated, or we may even have to pull from SeaTac or Tukwila, and vice versa. We were in Renton for a river rescue at the same time that our apartment fire came in on Sunday. So everyone is swamped right now, a lot of moving parts, and we just deal with it and manage it and move on. But I just want to share those things with you. The last thing, I'll certainly answer any questions, but I can talk about COVID and what we've been through, our vaccination program, mobile vaccination that we've been doing that's kind of ramping down, the testing that we were involved with, and then any other fire department questions that you want to know. So with that.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll start first with the fireworks. So, you know, as a member of the Cove, there's lots of fireworks that people typically, you know, will set off, you know, just at the beach at the Cove. Are you also saying that we shouldn't set fireworks off at the Cove in Normandy Park? No fireworks. It's just better to be safe this year because the fire danger is so high. If you could just kind of elaborate on, even if fireworks are legal and it's safe and you're close to the body of water, there's still potential for things to go wrong.
There definitely is. Yeah, that fire danger, you know, that would be my recommendation. That would be my ask of the people, is that we don't. We certainly work, and I'm going to maybe preface it a little bit. This year, I mean, the message is certainly we would like to see no one doing any fireworks. The other issue with the Cove, or even with a lot of other places, and this is where it gets very delicate, I guess, or I'll just say it that way, is There are what's called safe and sane fireworks that are legal in the unincorporated to sell and discharge. Some of those, have a heightened fire danger, but typically they're a lower consumer grade of fireworks. And then you have the next level, which is they're already state illegal, but you can buy them at local Indian reservations, or you can go out of state and buy them, and so there's other ways. And those are certainly a heightened, and I'll just speak as the 16-year-old Mike Mars, and not the fire chief Mike Mars. Those were the cool ones, right? I mean, those are the bottle rockets, those are the Roman candles, those are the big ones, the mortars and those kind of things. Those are the ones that are highly uncontrollable. And honestly, those cause, I think probably per capita or per firework, more damage because they go farther, they're bigger boom, bigger fire, less control. I mean, you get a little safe and sane fountain, you put it in the middle of the huge sandy beach and light it off, and the little showers go up 4 or 5 feet, and it's ooh-ah, and that's about it. But you start shooting mortars hundreds of feet in the air, or they go 100 feet to the right because they fell over, or bottle rockets that are uncontrollable. Those are the ones that are landing on people's shake roofs and starting house fires, or apartment buildings, or dry grass, dry shrubs, all those kind of things. So I don't want to make a judgment call on the different levels of fireworks, but certainly the ones that you buy at Indian reservations, I think, cause us more problems. In Burien, they're all illegal, and in the unincorporated, even though we try to get that education, we'll be out. We have myself as the fire chief, 2 assistant chiefs, 2 inspectors, and our PIO, all going out along with a lot of people from Ted's group, out trying to do public education. And like I said, we have varying. All of it's illegal in Burien. There are some that are legal in the unincorporated. By and large, it's not the legal ones that are causing us problems in the unincorporated. It's the illegal ones that are statewide illegal, and people either don't want to know, or they just play dumb and they feel like, well, it's legal in the unincorporated area. But there is a very bright line of what's legal and illegal, and we're trying to do that education. Back to your question, my recommendation and my ask is don't do any this year, because it's just too dangerous.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Question from Terry Jorgensen. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Terry. Ask a question.
Hi, we live up in just above Shorewood. But my question really is, can the state or somebody not have some sort of emergency measure? At this situation, it's bad normally, but this is really unusual.
So we are working with the King County Fire Marshal to look at, and the 2 things that the fire marshals group, so individual cities and the unincorporated areas, have a fire marshal group that are responsible for enforcing fire code issues. One of those is the burn ban and some of the others. So what we're working with, and as you know, the 4th is on Sunday, so we're kind of scrambling. There is a push either to ban all sales, which seems to be politically a big lift at this time. There doesn't seem to be a lot of political will to want to shut down all of the stands last minute to sell. And so we're trying to push, and the fire marshals group is trying to, for an emergency declaration to ban the discharge everywhere. Now realize it's already banned in Burien, and Ted will say, I mean, it's been banned for several years now, and it's still, there are fireworks that go off, and both police and fire are out there trying to curtail it as much as possible. But just because it's banned, you still have to have the resources to enforce it, and it's very, very difficult to enforce it. So we're trying to get an emergency ban, either the sale or the discharge or both. I don't think there's going to be a last minute ban on the sale. We're hopeful that we can get a fire safety ban, but then the second part of that is how are we going to enforce it? How do we get around to literally thousands of people that are lighting off fireworks just in our community, let alone the tens of thousands throughout the county and the state. So it's just, it's a huge problem. I appreciate what you're saying though.
Thank you very much.
Perfect, thanks. One question in the chat, again, just responding to the 30-year fire danger. Should we be watering every day between now, and the 4th, just trying to be, proactive? If, that little 10 by 10 piece of our lawn doesn't catch on fire, we can help mitigate somewhat.
Yeah, I do at home. I set the sprinkler up going into the 4th, and I leave it running on the 4th. I'm away on the 4th most of the times, but my neighbors, I live in the city of Des Moines, they're illegal there. My neighbors don't recognize the ban. And I'll actually put a sprinkler up on my roof too. And I have a shake roof, but I've seen way too many bottle rockets go into a gutter and start the eaves on fire and either burn an entire roof or entire house down. So certainly anything you can do to minimize the fire getting started and getting ahead is helpful. So, we're in severe drought conditions almost everywhere in the state, except for in the Cascades. We had above average snowfall. They're not at this point telling us not to water our lawns, not to conserve water. I'm pretty sure I'm not giving out bad advice there. And so we have good snowpack. And I think for a 1 day, I think I would let it run. Definitely.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Another question in the chat related to the issue of the cooling centers. We did have cooling centers in our community, and Chief Bo, I think you mentioned, one was at the Burien Community Center. We had another one in the lobby of, the library, City Hall. The police station was also a cooling center. So we did create cooling centers, and now we just have to figure out what our plan is to move forward. And did I capture that correctly? Okay, perfect. I'm seeing nods. Fantastic. All right, next question in the chat. You talked, Chief Mars, about Independence Day being all hands on deck for the fire department, and thank you so much for that. Beyond responding to the emergency calls in the advanced education, could you maybe talk a little bit more specifically about what your proactive response is? And this might be for you too, Chief Bo, in terms of, are you actively patrolling neighborhoods, looking for people that are illegally discharging fireworks? And if so, the Seahurst neighborhood apparently is a hot spot for some illegal firework activity. And again, thank you for all your work.
Yeah, so we proactively, and it's pretty easy. You just drive around with your window down and you hear them going off. There again, they're not legal anywhere in the state, but you hear the firecrackers, you hear the bottle rockets, you see some of the effects, during the daylight. And so we have a little 1-page educational for Burien. It's fireworks are illegal. You can't own them, you can't possess them, you can't discharge them, can't sell them, whatever else. And so we just don't do it. So after we do that, and we have repeat customers, we can literally, I have been shot at with bottle rockets as we're putting out a house fire. And so it gets a little crazy. But as we drive around and we will make contact with people and in the best friendly manner that we can, try to educate. After that, we hand it off to police. And so we just, hey, would you guys go by, look at this? We talked to these people or this general area, and we went through again, and they're still lighting them off. And so we'll hand those off up until a point, and it kind of varies every year. But we will go out until such time as we just start getting run ragged, and it's just kind of choreographed mayhem for about 3 or 4 hours, depending on how the night is going. But we are literally going from fire to fire to fire, and then we throw in a few other miscellaneous calls. And then we have to do cause and origin investigation. We have to wait for a fire investigator to come out. Especially if it's a larger loss, we'll call in someone from the King County Fire Investigation Unit or one of our fire investigators need to document that scene. And so we call it sitting on a fire. So we have to sit on a fire. And most of the time that's taking an engine company out of service. They will work with the fire investigator. They'll document what caused the fire, what didn't cause the fire, almost more importantly, because if we have to go testify, we have to be able to say, well, the fireworks caused it. We know it's not electrical. Here's why. We know it isn't smoking. Here's why. We know it's not all these other things. This is the only thing it could be. Here's where it started. Here's the documentation. And we have to be able to testify to that. And so it's a fairly long process. Multiply that by dozens of fires. We have to start figuring out what's the most important ones to do. What are the bigger losses? And then typically where we, on a normal fire, we leave the engine company there to help overhaul. What we're doing now is we're taking the fire chief, the assistant chiefs, our inspectors, and we're sitting on those so the engine company can respond to the next one. And so at that point, we're really taken away from the proactive that we're trying to do. And we just go into a reactionary mode where we're just responding to calls somewhere between 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, it slows down. But we're just in a reactionary mode at that point. And we just have to triage the calls, do the best we can with the resources, put the fires out, because that's the most important, document the ones that we think need the best documentation. If it's just another set of bushes that are on fire and it's the 30th of the night, sorry, you'll probably get a picture taken. It'll be documented that there was a fire most likely caused, and we'll move on to the next one. So I don't know if that totally answers the question. So we start off proactive. This year, we've got the biggest proactive team we have, and we'll be out all day trying to make contact with people. Mix in a little alcohol, and we tend to turn those over to the police earlier. Not everyone likes, even the fire department, coming up and telling them not to do their fireworks. And so we tend to back off those and hand those over to the police.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. I think that what strikes me about, both of the presentations is that, prevention is so important, being proactive, whether we're talking about crime, we're talking about fire danger, public safety really starts with a active prevention model, and that takes the whole community working in connection and in collaboration. And how important it is just for us to continue to engage with each other and help each other out. I know when we did a presentation with the National Guard, they said the number one thing you can do to prevent a disaster or for your disaster response is to know your neighbors, right? So that you can check on them, when it's hot outside, right? When there's something happening that doesn't look right or seems off, right? That the people in your community, in your neighborhood, the people that you're doing business next to, that those relationships are vital to maintaining public safety, and prevention is huge. So again, really, really appreciate you both being here.